From AJ Raphael's We Could Happen to Wong Fu Productions' Strangers Again. These videos allowed me to enter into a whole new world in the mainstream media that I have never seen before. But this is only my representation. So, what is your representation, and what change would you like to see done for the community?
What API persons, communities, or groups do you know about but don't see in mainstream media? And why is it important? I actually recently heard about a community group here in San Diego called the Bayanihan Community Response, and they basically tend to the urgent and long-term needs of impacted Filipino communities. So far, what they've been doing is they've been working hand in hand with the Filipino Nursing Association of San Diego in helping Filipino families get their COVID vaccines. They also recently did a food drive for South Bay area where they basically provided groceries for families. And I think it's very important for organizations like this to be more known and heard about, because especially during times like this, a lot of families are in need of their essential items, and it's very hard for them to get those essential items. How should we raise awareness for the public about what is going on within the API community, and what changes / actions would you like to see done for the community? So, of course, right now, social media is the main outlet for everyone to get their news, their current news and informations about what's going on. So I think it's, with that in mind, it's very important for us to share and broadcast this information so that more people can become aware of it, but also do it with the right intentions. Don't share it just because your friend is doing it or because it's just the trend right now and everyone else is doing it. Share it because you want a change to happen. Share it because you want more people to know about what's going on. We need to utilize our resources within the right ways and the right intentions to get the point across. In terms of what's happening in the API community right now, it's very heartbreaking, and it sucks that it's just now, when the past couple months been shared, because it has been happening not only for years but since the pandemic has happened. I think it's important for a lot of people to know that the API community, we are not the model minority. We need to break that perspective, because that itself is what is making a lot of people think that we are unbreakable, we're untouchable, we can't, none of this is happening and it's affecting us in a certain way, it's something that we can handle ourselves. That's something that we need to break.
I'd have to say that the greatest Asian Pacific Islander influence in my life would have to be my parents. I know that sounds incredibly cliche, but it's also very true. My parents are the ones who taught me about love and unconditional love, about compassion, and most importantly, about putting family first, instilling in me those really collectivistic family values, and doing everything for the sake of the group and for the community. And I think that as a teacher, that is something that definitely my parents had great influence over. In my perspective as a teacher now, it really does rule the way I engage my students, because I feel like if the students are not succeeding, then I'm not succeeding. So really looking out for other people, because their success, my students' success, is my success. And so that is definitely one of the greatest influences in my life, are just my parents. When it comes to the dominant narratives of my identity or community that I've tried to fight or combat, one of them is this model minority myth, or pressure, I should say, that Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders are all supposed to be great, musicians, piano players, good at math, engineering, and science. They're meant to be doctors and whatnot. And sure, there's some truth to that, and at the same time, that puts a lot of pressure on college students, on adolescents, to live up to this ideal of what society expects of us. It's almost as if we don't live up to that expectation, then we've failed our own identity, right? Like, how can you be bad at math? You're Asian. Or how can you be a liberal arts major? You should be in STEM. Those sorts of narratives are continuously permeating in education today. And as an educator myself, it's not only been a stereotype that I've tried to combat, but also one that has been relatively limiting, and in that sense, not even limiting per se. And now that I think about it, it's more that it pigeonholes me and my identity. I've taught at some college campuses where a student will walk in on the first day of class and literally think, oh my gosh, am I in the accounting class? Am I in the wrong place? Or am I in a math class? I'm like, no, you're in communication studies. So welcome to my classroom. In terms of raising awareness to the public about what's going on within the API community, I think it to piggyback off of my answer to the last question, it's that we have to increase the visibility of these issues, and also break out of, once again, that model minority myth, right? That, oh, the Asian American and Pacific Islander community are untouchable, right? Because they're all so great at everything. Like, okay, but they're also still subject to racism, prejudice, hatred, hate crimes. And so I feel like that is the one step towards that direction, is to not only increase awareness, but also to deconstruct that narrative of us being the model minority community. That overall is going to be what takes us into the right direction for this discussion.
Who has been the greatest AAPI influence in my life? Well, I don't think of them as my AAPI influence. They are just my influence. And of course, they are my parents, who happen to be Asian American. My parents immigrated to Hawaii in the 70s from South Korea, and they met in Honolulu in order to pay for college. My father joined the United States Army, ended up serving as part of the U.S. Armed Forces for 20 years. My mother was a stay-at-home mom. Both of them did everything they could to ensure that my brother and I would, fit in. Especially since we are Army kids, we moved around a lot. And aside from when we lived in South Korea at Yongsan, when we're in places like Virginia or Georgia or Kansas, right, it seems like we're the only Asian kids around or at school. And so, I don't see this as a positive or negative, but there was a very specific reason why my parents made sure that we spoke perfect English, that we wore the latest fashions, that we had peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and chips and apples for lunch at school, and that we went by our American names. We both have Korean names as well. My Korean name is Minjung. It was my parents' way of, trying to protect us from racism, from bullying. It was their survival mechanism. And, sometimes it worked in that it allowed me to fly under the radar once in a while. But it didn't always work. You can't hide from your identity, right? What's really important to ensure is that Asian American and Pacific Islander representation doesn't reduce AAPI folks into mere stereotypes, that we need to actively reject caricatures, that we need to call out stereotyping when we see it, right? And we have the power of social media these days to do that. Despite the recent visibility of South Korean media, right? We need more visibility of all AAPI groups, right? Because when you think about it overall, AAPI folks continue to be ignored, overlooked, dismissed, right? As if we don't exist, especially here in the United States. And so whatever, ethnic group we're thinking about, we need nuanced and thoughtful representation.
Who is one of my greatest influencers in my life would have to be my mom and my grandma. My mom and my grandma, they came down here in refugees in the late 60s, early 70s. So just growing up in that household and in that environment, they taught me a lot about love and respect and honor. And it's not that easy to say, because for refugees that survived genocide, and for them to still have so much compassion and still teach me patience and love and understanding, that just goes to show that no matter what they've been through, they still instilled a lot of those values and cultures within me that I will continue to share with the entire world. What are some of the API communities that I've seen? And honestly, within my community, I have not seen anything physically. However, I have seen a lot of groups on social media that they provide a lot of awareness, and they show a lot of the things that are happening within the Asian community. And it's Jackfruit and AWA. They show a lot of some of the problems and issues that the Asian American and Pacific Islander community that are experiencing, and they bring it to light. Truth be told, I don't see any of these issues being brought up in mainstream media. At least it's good to know that there are some platforms out there that are still bringing a lot of light to the issues that we as Asian Americans do continue to experience. And it just provides us a platform to really educate and share with others about our stories and our narratives.
So, I think it's time for us to say bye to these dominant narratives in our lives.